Rod Blagojevich could face 15 to 20 years, and the General Assembly left town with some unfinished business. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to this fall edition of Capitol View, the program where we talk about state government, sometimes the federal government, and how it just might affect your life. I'm Bernard Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register, and lucky to have with me a couple of State House scribes. Of course, everybody takes pictures and does other stuff now, too. Immediately to my left, Chris Wetterich is here, one of my colleagues, and thank goodness that he and Doug Fink are at the State House for us, because they do the real work. State House reporter for the State Journal-Register. Chris, welcome.
How you doing, Bernie?
Benjamin Yount is here, Illinois State House News. He does radio, TV, he does it all.
Yeah, I'll wash your car, apparently.
Thank you very much.
I think those are my duties as other assigned.
And the reporting he does goes statewide, as does Chris's, to many of the papers aligned with the SJR. Gentlemen, we need to talk about Rod Blagojevich. I know people in Central Illinois hate talking about Rod Blagojevich. Well, maybe they don't, but it's a situation where sentencing comes up next week unless there's some delay, and the government has said he is a really bad guy and needs 15 to 20 years. And Blagojevich's lawyers, I believe, are going for probation, saying he was just duped by the people around him. He was just trying to do the right thing. What's going to happen, Ben?
When I saw that Tony Rezko got a total of 10.5 years, he's already done 3, so it's about 7.5. I stood up in my office and said, Rod Blagojevich is going to prison for 50 years. I thought that Rod was going to get the hammer dropped on him. I'm a little surprised. 15 to 20, I think, it's low. It sounds low.
To who? Have you ever been away from home for a month? Excuse me.
Well,
I mean,
listen,
this is serious.
I wouldn't want to do 15 to 20, but just I think the public expectation was that Rod was going to be made an example of. And yeah, 15 to 20 in the can, not for me. But I was kind of shocked when I heard that first number. I really thought that after the federal government tried him twice, there was there clearly was some retribution being sought by the U.S. Attorney's Office. I really thought that they would go for a just knockout number, not just to punish the governor.
You're saying the government is, because they had to try him twice, they're going for a larger sentence?
This is why people who plead get a lesser sentence. The trial tax.
I hope you don't get in trouble, Ben. This is on television.
That's right. In fairness to him, you know, the sentencing guidelines call for a sentence of 30 years to life.
Do they really?
They do. That's a story I wrote this morning.
Right. Explain it to us.
Basically, it's really kind of arcane the way the sentencing guidelines work. It's based on, number one, your criminal history, which Rod has none of, really, so he's good there. But then the offense level, and basically they start out with a number between, I think in his case it was 7, and they add on different items for your conduct. In Rod's case, for example, in Blagojevich's case, they added 4 points for the fact that he was in a position of power and influence and responsibility. And there's various things in the code that add up, and he ended up with a sentencing or an offense level of 42 out of a possible 43,
wow,
according to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Now, the defense has a different opinion, of course, on what his offense level should be. So, in one respect, the U.S. Attorney's Office was maybe perhaps lenient by not suggesting 30 years to life. Now, in their filing that they put in yesterday, they basically said, this is the sentence that we think is on par with what other defendants in corruption cases have received.
Which, we'll be reminded of George Ryan, who arguably there wasn't as much like taped evidence of him saying bad words and indicating he wanted to do bad things.
Right.
But he got less than 7 years.
6.5 years.
And he's still serving time, which to his family, by the way, is a long time, Ben.
And don't forget that Rod Blagojevich came after George Ryan. Rod got elected saying no more business as usual. That if you take a look at this in a narrative, the federal government with the George Ryan case said, hey guys, come on, the system has changed. You can't do this anymore. It has to be honest now. And Rod stepped up to the plate, said, make me governor, sure I'll do it, of course I'll be honest. And
he sold that well on the stump. Yes.
Look how it turns out. So it's, anybody who has kids, you know that at some point they're going to eat a cupcake before they have dinner. But once you tell them, hey, no, do it the second time, that's when they get in trouble. And that's why I'm saying that the public perception of the Blagojevich sentence, I think that after George Ryan got 6.5, and there wasn't nearly as much evidence. There weren't nearly the people waiting in line to tell the federal government what he had done.
Does it make any difference that Rod Blagojevich never got, quote unquote, a nickel out of this?
No, not according to the federal prosecutors. It doesn't.
I realize that people around him are raising millions of dollars that they were demanding from state contractors. Apparently,
none of those people can do what they do if Rod Blagojevich isn't governor. And that's why he abused his position of power, and he knew what he was doing. Rod didn't do this for 20, 30 years, as the supporters of George Ryan will say, that the system changed on George. Rod knew what the system was, and he didn't care.
Well, he ran against it, yeah.
He knew what the system was when his top fundraiser, Tony Rezko, was being indicted and convicted, and he still committed these criminal acts. And I think another thing to point out, I think his defense attorneys have done him a real disservice, or maybe he's done them a disservice, because in their filing, they continue to argue that he's innocent throughout the entire thing, instead of sticking to the law and saying, well, here's why he should have a lesser sentence under the law. I think that will show Judge Zagel, who is he's a no-nonsense judge. He's a law and order type of guy. I think he's going to throw the book at him for at least 20 years.
Well, that's just interesting. I was going to ask you, Chris, because you went to see Judge Zagel in the trial recently of Bill Cellini for several days. I got to see it for one day.
Yeah.
And I remember when Judge Zagel was director of the Department of Revenue in the Illinois State Police under Jim Thompson, so a lot of these people knew each other, but Blagojevich was probably at that time in high school or before. But your thoughts about the judge, and I know you weren't there for the Blagojevich trial, but you've had Rod Blagojevich going around the country before the trial, and then even after the trial, going on television, going on national television, proclaiming his innocence, doing silly things, sending his wife to a TV show over, in the Caribbean where she ate part of a spider or something.
Right.
Does that have any effect from your view of this judge?
I don't think the judge is going to care about the reality shows, but I think he does care about the appearances on WLS AM up there, and
which the station that gave Rod a weekly program for an hour or two every Sunday, where he would just say everybody's bad but me.
Right, and he would question the legitimacy of the legal proceeding that he was involved in, and I think it just shows a complete lack of remorse, and that Judge Zagel is going to take that into effect when he meets out this sentence.
Interesting. The legislature was in this last week. And I guess the reason that they were called down is to try to strike some kind of a deal for a tax break for the financial exchanges in Chicago, the Mercantile Exchange, and whatever the
Board of Trade.
Board of Trade, yeah, CME, I guess.
CME is the nomenclature.
The whole company, and then Sears, which some years ago moved its headquarters from Chicago to the suburbs, I think Hoffman Estates. They want a tax break too, but the school districts out there don't want that, so whatever. Those things didn't happen. What's the situation?
Well, John Bradley, Southern Illinois Democrat in the House, who sort of has taken this on his shoulders, was almost joined the Century Club. I've never seen an issue.
Explain what that is.
I've never seen an issue of that importance.
More than 100 no votes?
Almost get 100 no votes. It's rare that universally agreed upon terrible ideas get 100 votes, 100 no votes. And this was, it fell apart so spectacularly and so quickly that I think it caught people off guard.
But it passed the Senate, did it not?
The Senate passed its own version.
Okay.
That had a bit of a different rate for the earned income child tax credit increase that the governor had talked about. But when it got to the House, everybody jumped off. And there was no one reason why the plan died. It died for a number of reasons, because there was no one reason for everyone to be for it. Bradley made you could just hear the disappointment in his voice when he spoke Tuesday night and said, I'm not giving up, we'll try.
So the problem just politically or realistically now is what? The state is billions in the hole, and to give more tax breaks to big companies that are demanding them may not be politically palatable if you don't.
It invites,
even it out.
In the words of Barbara Flynn Courier, it basically seems to let people come and jack the state whenever they feel like it. And
she being the House
majority leader, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the concern anyway. I think you can narrow it down to a couple. It passed the Senate because the Senate president was working the bill hard. He's been in negotiations with CME for quite a while. So this was something he really cared about. In the House, he had Speaker Madigan disengaged from the process because he had some kind of conflict of interest.
So he removed himself.
Right.
Yeah, well, this is interesting because Chicago is like a financial center of the whole world, in a sense, certainly of the country, because they have these exchanges, and if these exchanges are threatening to leave, that's a difficult thing for the economy of the state. But will they really leave, or any idea of that, or are these idle threats, or do we have any idea of nothing?
I don't think anybody knows. I think that was the gamble that CME was willing to take, and it's that some lawmakers are willing to take. Of, let's play this out and see where it goes. CME very well could move. Their claim is that they're being unduly burdened by the recent tax increase because their business model has changed due to electronic trading, and they feel that they're being hurt more than some of Illinois' other companies that have a global presence. And they could very well move some of their operations just across a border or to another state in another part of the country, and the buildings would still be there, but they could just move their corporate structure and sort of dodge the tax. Sears is a little different because they actually have people who are employed and then have to move to another state. But it's a difficult thing, and in this economy, do you really want to take the chance that these people are going to take hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of jobs and just deposit them in another state?
But on the other hand, as Judy Bartopinka, the comptroller, put out a statement, we're already $8 billion to people. We don't have money. So if you're going to give a tax break to somebody else, figure out how to pay for it. Mm-hmm. So,
I think one of the reasons this failed was, if you look at the votes in the Senate, there were, I believe, 9 Senate Republicans on the bill. They voted for the bill
before the break.
Yeah, and in the House, nobody was for it on the Republican side. And then when Democrats saw that it was not going to pass, that's when it went up to 99 votes.
Yeah.
I don't think there are actually 99 no votes.
Some people are like, if it's not going to pass anyway, why get out on a limb?
Why be recorded as a yes vote? Yeah.
On the other hand, I guess you could call it good news that Governor Quinn some months ago announced he was going to close 7 state facilities, including one in Jacksonville, a developmental center for folks, and one in Lincoln, a prison. And then an agreement was reached, and money was moved around to keep those 7 facilities open after people in those towns who work at those places and their families were kind of on pins and needles for a long period of time. How permanent is that fix?
Not very.
What's
at least for the mental health facilities. The governor's office has a plan to basically transition out of these group homes that some of the mentally handicapped people are in, and that's a plan that will take place over the next 2.5 to 3 years. So a place like Jacksonville Development Center, they could find themselves again facing closure in the coming years.
Yeah, it's part of an ongoing. The advocates for the
right.
People with certain kinds of mental problems have been talking about putting them in community settings for years, less institutionalization, and yet some of the people who fight the hardest against that are the parents of some of these people of all ages who are profoundly disabled and need
around the clock
care. Part of the problem is, and I've written about this a number of times, talked to some of the parents, is that in some of these communities there just isn't that sort of infrastructure. If you go up to Dixon, where the Jack Mabley Center is, if you close Mabley, you have to open something else. And it's not going to be a state institution. A private company will come along and do it and get some state money to run it. But right now, that sort of community care that they want to transition these folks into doesn't exist. Mabley, Singer, Tinley Park, Jacksonville will probably all close.
But how soon?
The plan is the next 3 years.
Yeah, well, I've heard some talk that it's going to happen during fiscal year 13.
Where did the money come from to keep these 7 open now? I heard education.
That's where the school bus money went, some of the regional superintendent money went, and this pushing back of the Medicaid bills. Essentially the governor's budget vetoes, and the House had to come in. The one silver lining, at least for the legislature from this, is a number of lawmakers say that the governor has finally realized that he has to be involved, that we can't go back and do what we did in June, where the governor gets the budget and then on the last day of the fiscal year takes his veto pen out. They're hoping that the new Governor Quinn is going to be involved in actually crafting a budget through the 2013 process, because that's how we got to this point. I mean, there were layoff notices for 300 people sitting on desks ready to be sent out this week had lawmakers not acted. And I think that everybody involved wants to avoid this kind of showdown next year, but it's going to be very, very difficult. That's why I don't think that any of these institutions are going to survive through the end of the 2013 budget.
And on that point,
Well,
it
that's
was
pleasant. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
on that point, it was interesting because Gary Hanig, who is advising the governor on budget matters, he's got a contract. He's the former deputy majority leader in the House.
Yeah, and then he was IDOT director, and he was a state rep from Litchfield in that area.
A
for
key
many years.
lieutenant to Mike Madigan. You know, he was on the floor and he got a round of applause from the House during the day that they were in this week. And the thought is kind of that having Hanig around is helpful to the governor because Hanig understands the legislature, whereas most of his staff, frankly, do not.
You meaning the governor's staff?
Right, the governor's staff.
But the governor's been around state government for 30 years. I will say, I guess, when he announced the closures of the 7 facilities, do you guys think he was serious at that time, or was it all just his version of leverage to get the legislature to do something?
It's always gamesmanship with this guy. I mean, you know, I don't believe for a second that because he even admitted that it would be very difficult in his department. I'm sorry, not the governor personally, but his Department of Human Services admitted that trying to close these facilities in one fiscal year would be way too quick, and they weren't ready to do it. And so I think it was clearly leverage, and I don't think any lawmaker really believed that he was going to close all 7.
And that's his style. And you said he's been around state government. He's always been on the periphery.
Never been in it.
You can have somebody when you're a candidate.
He was state treasurer and he was lieutenant governor before he was governor. He did start as the activist.
He was a lieutenant governor in exile,
who
more or
cut
less,
aside
from the day he took office.
But anybody would be proud to be an exile from Blagojevich.
That's true.
But no, and he has had to learn on the fly, and his first 2 budgets were these lump sum budgets where he had Superman powers to do with what he wanted. And the General Assembly last year said, I'm sorry, we're in charge of this budget and we will tell you what to do. And that's where he was not in the process saying, okay, I understand you only want to spend 33.2, but I need to have this much money for X program or Y department. The General Assembly went along and just produced a budget, and the governor never said anything until the last day of the fiscal year while I'm sitting at the drive-in trying to watch Cars 2, and all of a sudden, kablam, he drops these vetoes. And
I hope you have children. And yes, you do. Anyway, another issue that was dealt with by the legislature when they were in was trying to close some loopholes or special deals that have allowed certain union leaders to get enhanced pensions off the state. There is a very odd situation that really the Tribune and WGN-TV did the research on and brought out that a couple of top officials or significant officials of Illinois Federation of Teachers, known locally in Springfield, Steve Preckwinkle and Dave Pitchley, substitute taught for a day and were able to get a union or a teacher's pension from the teacher's retirement system as opposed to from their union job, or maybe anyway, they were getting a state pension because of that. And the legislation that closed up some of these loopholes are also union leaders in Chicago who are getting big pensions based on their union salary as opposed to their much smaller city salaries before they went to the union. That's all been changed, at least going forward, except the legislation tried to take away the pensions of these two. What does this do? You know, pensions have become a giant issue because of the liability, the billions in liability over years, the rather good pensions that have been promised to some state employees over time that cannot be taken away because of the Constitution. Do the changes that the legislature just made eat away at that, or just get rid of this particular issue?
It doesn't do anything for the larger issue, and everybody kind of admitted that. I mean, this was a screaming headline type of a problem that they quickly tried to fix. I'm not sure they've. I mean, the 2 gentlemen that you talked about, their spokesman thinks that it's unconstitutional.
So that they should be able to.
They might be able to sue them. I don't know that they're going to pursue that. I think and both of them. I know at least Preckwinkle is done at the end of the year at IFT, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know he's retiring. I'm not sure. Also, about
it may.
Dave.
I mean, it's a PR problem for the IFT because they can't really come in and say, well, you shouldn't reduce the pensions when they have these 2 pension abusers as their chief lobbyists.
Yeah, Preckwinkle is in line to get a $108,000 a year pension, double what an average classroom teacher, according to the numbers from the IFT gets. This is low-hanging fruit.
That's exactly what it is.
This is exactly what the legislature is great at. Small pieces of legislation to take care of big headline problems. But yeah, Tom Cross even said this when he presented the bill in committee, when he presented the bill on the floor. There is still more work to do. The unfunded liabilities between 80 and 100 something billion dollars. Next year, the pension payment goes up an extra $1 billion. There's eventually
pensioners are not going to not be paid now. This is just future liabilities
Yeah,
that they have
and-
to
and-
over time figure out a way to pay into the system enough so people will for years and years and decades be paid what they are owed by the state.
No one has missed a check.
Right.
And I don't think that anyone's talking about anybody missing a check. It's just how do you deal with every new dollar that is expected to come into the state budget for next year. $1 billion in revenue growth has just been taken away by the $1 billion in revenue growth for the pensions.
Right,
and then you also have Medicaid growth. You have just the general growth of the state budget. Every dollar that has to be tucked away for public pensions is a dollar that gets to be is a dollar that's not being spent on something
Right,
else.
and of course some of the business groups and others want the state to change the pension situation for current employees going forward, so they would have what they earn, but have a different system going forward, maybe a 401k or much higher payments to keep the same, and there are to keep the same, defined benefit later. Whereas I know the Senate staff and Senate President Cullerton's legal aide had said, you can't do that.
No
because-
welching. That's what he said. You can't
you
welch.
You can't. If it's promised, the Constitution says you can't change.
Most succinct sentence by a
benefits.
lawyer I've ever read. You can't welch.
So if you're a current state employee, your pension benefits are told to you as such, they should not change ever until you're retired. So
Whatever they do, it's going before the court. I mean, if and I don't know that the Senate will necessarily go along with what House Minority Leader Cross is talking about. I don't know that the House Democrats will go along with it. I think they got 3 votes for that on the Democratic side. Madigan, the pension chairman, Kevin
McCarthy?
Why am I forgetting his name? I talk to him all the time, McCarthy, and Elaine Necritz. I don't think they have any more than
I
that.
don't know how many downstate Republican votes do you have? I mean,
Yeah. As far as IFT, this brings me along to another situation. Toby Trimmer has been Chief of Communications for President Cullerton of the Senate. He comes out of the union movement, is going back to, I believe, take Mr. Preckwinkle's job, overseeing legislation and things at the Illinois Federation of Teachers. He will bring a new face to it, and I did talk to him some about it. He said, yeah, difficult situation, but their situation is that, and the union still has its issues. We represent a lot of good teachers, and that's what we're about. There are also some other staff changes at the Senate, because Andy Manar, who is running for state Senate, he comes from Macoupin County, is leaving at the end of the year as chief of staff to the Senate president, and Dave Gross, who has been a lobbyist for Southern Illinois University, is taking over as chief of staff of the Senate. Used to work for the Senate Democrats for 20 years, and comes from Jacksonville in our viewing area, where his late dad, Bill, was Democratic County chairman over in Jacksonville, and his mom Barb Gross was a county official there for many years. So it's just a local boy makes good, and hope that works out well. Another situation, Tenaska, over in Taylorville, there's this Nebraska firm that's trying to build a coal-fired plant, and the Senate passed a bill to allow that to happen, but the big utilities in Illinois hate it because the legislation would allow them to charge a certain level
Requires
of
them
rates
to
to
buy
make
it.
money in order to get this done as a clean energy plant. Any thoughts on if Tenaska will get now through the House and the way the Senate passed
that's
it?
like the Frankenstein bill. I mean, it came up over and over and over again, and it finally passed with 30 votes, I believe.
yeah, exactly 30, and it took a long time to get to those last 2.
I think it'll take an equally long time, if ever, to get out of the House.
The merits of it have been debated and debated. I think that when Senate President Cullerton took over sponsorship in the Senate, I think that was a clear signal that it would eventually find its way. Leaders in the chambers don't often attach their names to dogs of legislation.
Is this a dog?
Kyle McCarter seems to think so.
Which would be a senator from the area who, from
It's not a dog in the sense that it passed.
Yeah.
But before that, it definitely was.
I think this is one of these issues that, like you said, you just keep coming back and coming back.
So
and
we
coming
think it
back
passed the
and coming
Senate
back.
by, I guess, the bare minimum, but then unlikely to pass the House in the same form?
I think they've spent so much time. I don't have a sense at all of where it is in the House because they've had such a problem getting it out of the Senate. There was no thought at all that it would even get a vote in the House.
Okay.
So we'll see.
All right, Chris, I know that you recently wrote a story about, I guess it's the 20 legislators that are not running for re-election. Is that a bigger crop than usual? And I know
I think it's about what you would expect in a redistricting year that we're having. I don't think it's any more or less. but it's certainly a significant amount. And you had some prominent names in there. Jeff Schoenburg, a member of Senate Democratic leadership.
Who is from my hometown of Evanston, but
not related.
Spells his name one letter different, and I really have enjoyed knowing him, but I now no longer will have to do double takes when I hear, Senator Schoenburg. How'd that happen?
Yeah.
But that's a significant loss. He's going to work for the Pritzker family because he's been
figuring out how to give billions of dollars away. It must be a
it
terrible
is
job.
not a bad
I'll make
job.
sure to give him my address before he leaves the
Yeah,
Capitol.
one of the new map has created some interesting scenarios, and in the Springfield area and to the west as well is particularly interesting because Larry Bomke, state senator, Republican from I guess 18 or 20 years here, is not running again. Sam McCann lives just outside that district, but you're allowed to, because he represents so much of the new 50th, he's running in the new 50th. So is Steve Dove for the Republican nomination, an alderman from Springfield. So is Gray Knoll, who's on the park board in Springfield, and a lawyer, an assistant state's attorney who just took a leave of absence. And he's got the Sangamon County endorsement, but Republican county chairman from the 8 other counties are all for Sam McCann, so this is going to be a very intra-party battle, which is just what the Democrats wanted when they drew the new map, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no coincidence. And full disclosure, I worked with Gray when I worked at the state's attorney's office.
Many years ago.
County, many years
You did
ago.
PR for them?
I did something for them. I can't
Okay,
even really
thank you
remember
very
what
much.
it was
I'm
that
glad
I
we
did.
paid you.
I cashed the check every 2 weeks. But I think that this comes down to population and votes and getting out the votes and how many more people are in Springfield than are in the rest of the district, and how much better will Sam McCann have to do in those areas to overcome. On a local note, how strong is the Sangamon County Republican organization?
And the fact that there are now 2 people from, even though
think they
Sangamon
gotta
County
get-
has endorsed Gray,
Yeah.
Steve Dove is also from here, so you're splitting the vote, which looks good for Sam McCann at this moment. We'll see how it goes.
I think they got to get one of them out of the race if the Sangamon County Republicans hope to hold that seat.
We'll see how it goes. With that, it's time to say goodbye for this week. Chris Wetterich, Benjamin Yount, thanks for the help. I'm Bernie Schoenburg, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Capitol View.